And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host. I'm your guide as together we'll cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, iHeartRadio, and of course, Simul Radio and Simul TV. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And to find out about the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. And for all the programming that is available on Simul TV on the X Zone TV channel, channel number 21 that is, www.simultv.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is Ras Ben. He is an innovative educator, counselor, wellness provider, peacekeeper, mediator, sacred timekeeper, and scribe. Originally from Washington, D.C., Ras Ben has served in the Philadelphia area for over 2 decades, falling in love with the city after receiving his M.A. from Temple University in African American Studies in 1992. Ras Ben is a self-published author and has recently released Rocks of Ages, a new edition. Rocks of Ages is a culturally centered survey of the therapeutic use of crystals and sacred stones. A family man who advocates healthy home environments for the youth, Ras Ben has been married 28 years and is the father of 7 children. Ras is a spirited man who brings a divine presence to all events he is part of. His website, www.rasben.com. And Ras Ben, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about this quest that you're obviously on. You know, you seem to be deeply involved in the the educational field and so on. How does this relate to what you've done over the past, and how has your quest brought you into the present?
Well, you mentioned a love of the city, Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been here for a couple of decades. And one thing I noticed, not being from here,
Mm-hmm.
and then moving here, the public art in Philadelphia just really stood out to me. And I noticed that people that were born here
Mm-hmm.
and lived here all their lives, it was just kind of a part of their backdrop, and they kind of took it for granted, didn't really pay attention to it. But just the macabre, mystical nature of the public art
Mm-hmm.
always, kind of called to me. And it kind of formalized in research in 2011 when a collective that I'm a part of wanted to do something special in the city on that 11/11. If you remember, in 2011, November 11th, there was like this great numerical alignment on the calendar. And you had people going to sacred sites all around the world, like Machu Picchu and Giza Complex, to, hold some spirit vibes. And there were people here in Philly saying, hey, we need to do something here. But then it raised the question, well, what is so mystical and spiritual about Philadelphia? And it caused some of us to begin this quest,
Mm-hmm.
that is actually culminated. I got to update my bio, I tell you, because I did just complete my latest book, which is kind of a culmination of that research, called Great Mystery Philadelphia.
Yeah, Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love, and of course everybody remembers Philadelphia from Rocky. What has been your focus of study, and why has it been based on decoding Philadelphia? Why Philadelphia of all cities?
Well, right. The popular connotation of the name Philadelphia is city of brotherly love. And
Mm-hmm.
most people think that's why William Penn named it as such, but that's not the case. Philadelphia was named that, because of the name Philadelphia, the place that it has in prophecy.
And where is that? And in which book of prophecy are you talking about?
Biblical prophecy, Revelations chapter 3, where you have a message to the 7 churches. And of the 7 churches, only one church receives of beneficent or benevolent prophecy, and that's the Church of Philadelphia. And it more or less says that, the community or the Church of Philadelphia, which they label the congregation that kept the faith, that they would be saved in the hour of trial that's to come upon the whole earth.
But if
so more or less, this idea of a blessed community that is spared judgment on quote unquote Judgment Day. That's the place that the community of Philadelphia holds within prophecy. And William Penn created Philadelphia as a holy experiment that his intention, the stated intention, was that if the gathered churches of London, which included Quakers, but as well as other Protestant denominations, as well as the Lenape or the indigenous Americans of this land, if they could live together in oneness, then his colony would earn that grace. And so, that's the intention that he put into naming the city Philadelphia.
Now, you mentioned the 7 churches that were mentioned in the book of Revelation, and what churches were they?
Man, I'd say I can't call it right off my mind. I know one was the Church of Sardia.
All right.
I don't have
you don't have that at the
right in front of me. I apologize.
It's all right. It's all right. How do we know for a fact that it is the church in Philadelphia that is explicitly talked about in the book of Revelation, since the book of Revelation was written so many years ago, and since those 7 churches that are talked about in the book of Revelation, there have been considerably more added to the list?
Right. Well, I think, on one level, it's allegorical.
All right. Explain how you came to that conclusion.
The fact that it's 7 churches, and 7 is kind of a mystical number within prophecy. And of course, there's a multitude of communities on planet Earth.
Of course. Yeah.
And the 7 churches kind of just represent the collective of humanity, And I'm not saying that this city, Philadelphia, is exactly what is referenced in Revelation. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I actually argue is that birthing this city, Philadelphia, was an attempt to manipulate the prophetic timeline of, related to the Church of Philadelphia, to enact a historical event that mimicked the fulfillment of that prophecy, but yet had a nefarious intention embedded in it. And that nefarious intention being the resurrection of Rome in the Western Hemisphere and the subjugation of the indigenous people over here.
All right, stand by. We've got to take our break. Exonation, our guest this hour is Ras Ben. His website is www.rasben.com. Listen, the X Chronicles newspaper for late January 2019 is now available online at www.xchroniclesnewspaper.com. It's there with our compliments. And our lead story this month's edition, the late edition, is the Project Blue Book TV show. And we have a review by Colonel Kevin Randall on page number 32. It's free. Go to www.xchroniclesnewspaper.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. We'll be back after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, one and all. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Just a reminder that starting mid-February, we don't have an exact date yet. Here in Hamilton on Channel 14, they are going to be playing the X Zone TV show. So as soon as we get the exact starting date and times, we will pass it on to each and every one of you. Plus, starting February the 1st, we are going to be on iLaunch TV in 50 states and in 50 countries. And later on in the month of February, we're going to be on Comcast. So the X Zone Nation is growing. And my God, this was a miracle that happened overnight, taking 30 years to do, but we did it, X Zone Nation, thanks to you and our worldwide audience. Our guest this hour is Ras Ben, and his website is rasben.com. I have to ask you, Ras Ben, it's a very interesting name. What is the origin of Ras Ben?
Well, Ras is a surname or a title within the Ethiopian tradition, the Amhara religion. It means one who is rising, or like a noble servant. So, that's like a title, Ras, and then I'm just Ras Ben,
Okay, so who bestowed this title on you?
Well, it's a title that resonates with my spirit. I am of the Rastafari tradition. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that's my name.
All right, you recently published a book entitled Great Mystery Philadelphia, An Urban Act of Magic. Can you tell us about that book and why you wrote it?
Yeah, well, I mentioned some of it in talking about how Philadelphia got its name. And really that I kind of stated it, that, Philadelphia is an attempt to manipulate a prophetic timeline.
Right, and as you were saying before we went to the commercial break, the rebuilding of Rome was part of that originally. But tell me, how does your degree in African American Studies figure into your book, Great Mystery Philadelphia?
Well, it did help set a perspective that is non-traditional, but yet scholarly. And I think that that's a way you could characterize my research. And that's how I would address that.
Right. Now, has your research been peer reviewed?
Well, my first work, Rocks of Ages, it's actually going on. The first edition came out in 2000.
Right.
Reprint came out in 2008. So, but to be honest, I'm not confined to the ebony or ivory towers, and I don't write for academia. I write for the folk that I serve, which is uh, the community of humanity, you know? So, and I also realized that a lot of the paradigms and frameworks that you find in
Hmm.
academia are are really designed to limit broader thought and things that might, like, for example, ideas that might go beyond the realm of evolution, or
Can you
uh,
give us an example of what you mean about going beyond the constraint, I would imagine, of evolution, or how evolution is supposed to take place based on the anthropological as well as scientific models?
well, there was a Canadian uh, scholar by the name of Agassiz who had some pretty powerful work
Hmm.
looking at the geology, uh, botany, uh, it's just a full multidisciplinary approach attempting to paint a picture of natural history. And what he came up kind of, raised doubts about a lot of Darwinian evolutionary uh, concepts, particularly the out of Africa evolution paradigm.
Right.
So everyone knows about Darwin.
Hmm.
Not too many know about Agassiz. And so that's just, one example. I mean, you know, to me, there's many that, you could look at the life of Tesla and how, uh, the scientific community of his time felt threatened by a lot of his uh, different approaches
I see.
to the production and conduction of power. And it took a while for the, scientific community to accept it. So that's not a uncommon pattern. And what I found is that my purpose, it extends beyond academia. It extends beyond the, ebony and ivory towers.
Now
So I
you mentioned this is the second time you mentioned ebony and ivory towers. How would you describe
because
them?
because the colleges are usually associated as the ivory tower,
The
but
Ivory
as
League, right?
but but right, but I studied African American studies.
Hmm.
So most of my professors, most of what I studied was black. So was,
Okay.
dealing with uh
Your culture.
it, exactly. So I just say Ebony Tower,
Okay.
yes.
Tell me about the Order of Rosy Cross.
And the Rosicrucians,
No,
Order of the Rosy Cross.
yeah.
I would say they're the ones that are uh facilitating this urban act of magic we know of as Philadelphia. And it is historical fact, and I see you one that likes facts. It is historic fact that the very first Rosicrucian order to establish itself in the Americas did so right here in Philadelphia on the 40th parallel, about
Hmm.
5 blocks from where I live. Uh, Historically, they're known as the Hermits of the Ridge. The head of it was a man named Johann Kelp, also known Latinized name as Johannius Kelpius. He came over in the late 1690s. They lived in caves in the Wissahickon Valley and were a mystical order inspired by Jacob Boehme, uh, aligned with Francis Bacon's colonization scheme. And their order did not survive because various factors. They were a celibate order. As I mentioned, they lived in the wilderness. They lived in caves.
Now, the fact that they lived in caves, was this something that they wanted to do, or were they forced to live in caves because of sociological indifferences at that time?
That's a very good question. It was really a response to you can look at it as on a refinement
Mm-hmm.
to Francis Bacon's colonization scheme.
Right.
Francis Bacon was a big investor in the Jamestown colony. And it was, considered a failure, that culminated in the Jamestown massacre. And when they studied why it failed, there was a couple of factors. One, the colonists were drawn from the king's court. So you had courtiers and tailors and jewelers and,
Mm-hmm.
people that weren't, built for creating their own food, clothing, and shelter from the land. They also did not have the capacity to relate well with the indigenous or the Native Americans. So Francis Bacon, who was a member of the Rosy Cross, hooked up with Jacob Boehme, who was another member of the Rosy Cross. Jacob Boehme created courses of study to create the perfect colonist, one who would have a rugged lifestyle, would live in caves, make his own food, clothing, and shelter right from the environment, as well as relate well to the indigenous.
All right, Ras Ben, please stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. XO Nation, our guest this hour is Ras Ben, and he is the author of Great Mystery Philadelphia, an urban act of magic, and his website is rasben.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, and I'll be back on the other side of the news. Don't go away. And welcome back, everyone. Ras Ben is our special guest, and his website is rasben.com. That's RASBEN.com. And he is the author of a recently published book entitled Great Mystery Philadelphia, an urban act of magic. Once again, his website is RASBEN.com. Ras Ben, can you tell us about the Ben Franklin's legacy and how you see it tying to the well-known Philadelphia experiment?
Well, I remember I started by saying that Philadelphia was really an attempt to manipulate a prophetic timeline.
Yes, you did, yeah.
And it was William Penn's holy experiment, right? So fast forward little less than a century, you got Ben Franklin in Philadelphia conducting what is known historically as the Philadelphia experiment.
So we're not talking about the ship that disappeared. We're talking about Ben Franklin's experiment. Am I right?
You're right. Ben Franklin's Philadelphia experiment evolved into what is known in pop culture as the Philadelphia experiment.
But wasn't the Philadelphia experiment mostly connected to Tesla?
Well, let me share the progression with you.
Sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really why I'm starting with Ben Franklin, because the Philadelphia experiment begins with Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
Okay. His study of electricity was well known throughout Europe, particularly France and Great Britain. And it was known as the Philadelphia experiment, and he conducted them, I think, in 1754, where right here in the city, he demonstrated that static electricity and lightning are the same phenomena. He was also able to identify that what he called electric fluid
Hmm.
had polarity and can be stored in polarized containers. That's, the foundation of battery technology. He also uh, discovered that this electric fluid can be conducted over wire. Okay, so Ben Franklin discovered the foundation of electronic circuitry and storage right here in Philadelphia. Okay, and he called it the Philadelphia experiment. Fast and as we said too, the foundation of Philadelphia is all about a manipulation of prophetic timelines and manipulation of, the course of history and prophecy. Okay, those two things converged
Hmm.
in the 1940s with what is known in pop culture as the Philadelphia experiment, where Franklin's technology of electricity combined with Tesla's advancement, as well as the invention of the computer. So all three uh, means, like the three key technologies needed for what they would call, manipulation of space time with technology, storage generation, conduction of electricity, the computer, which was ENIAC, invented right here at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and the actual manipulation of the space-time continuum with magnetic fields, which was first conducted, August 12th, 1943, uh, and right off Tinicum Island, which is not far from Philadelphia International Airport and the Philadelphia Naval Yard. So Franklin's legacy is actually what, we call the Philadelphia experiment and the manipulation of space-time using technology.
But there were also many other things that Benjamin Franklin is known for. He invented the lightning rod, bifocals. Let me see, the Franklin stove, and he was involved in civic organizations, including the what was it, the Library Company, Philadelphia's first fire department, and the
Absolutely.
University of Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. Well, when you study Franklin's life,
Yeah.
what you see is that he was America's Francis Bacon. How Francis Bacon, uh, founded the Royal Academy, the Royal Society of London,
Hmm.
which was the scientific think tank, as well as just advanced a lot of literary and a whole lot of social transformative things within London.
Hmm.
Ben Franklin did the same thing in the Americas. And yeah, he has a very profound
Yeah.
legacy.
But how come? How come
The
there's?
one I was just going to say, the one that I focus on, because I am dealing with Philadelphia as a manipulation of prophecy and space time. That's why I focus on that aspect of his legacy.
Then why is it most people know him for everything but what you're talking about?
Well, that comes to really paying attention to the public art in Philadelphia. Because if you decode the Ben Franklin Parkway
Hmm.
and like really pay attention to the things that they say with the art and the architecture and the archetype symbols, yeah, Ben Franklin did some that what I'm talking about is kind of mild. You know the statue, the thinker,
Yes.
kind of iconic statue, right?
Right.
Did you know that the statue, the Thinker, is on the Ben Franklin Parkway as a part of a permanent installation called the Gates of Hell? And it's situated in such a way that there's a microcosmic image of the Thinker actually on the sculpture of the Gate of Hell, such that it shows that the Thinker, and Ben Franklin is the Thinker,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that yeah, Ben Franklin as the Thinker actually opened up the gates of hell. This is what they're saying. And on one level, you might say, well, what is that? You know, where are you coming at with that? But then we know Ben Franklin was a part of a society.
Yeah, he was a Freemason. He was a Freemason, yeah.
Well, called the Hellfire Club.
Well, I don't know if I'd call the Freemasons the Hellfire Club.
Well, I mean, you can research this. Ben Franklin was a member of a society in London named the Hellfire Club.
Okay, I thought you were talking about his involvement with the Freemasons in the United States.
Well, he did found the Freemason Lodge here in Philadelphia, absolutely. But no, I'm speaking of his affiliation with the Hellfire Club. A man named Sir Thomas Dashwood was a member, as well as Wharton, Philip, Duke of Wharton. These are a couple of men who you could research and see that, yeah, they were caught up in scandal that had them associated with Satanism and ritual sacrifice. So I'm not going to say that they were doing these things, but they were caught up in scandal that associated them with those things. And Ben Franklin was a member of the Hellfire Club, which only had 12 members, and he was one of them.
Ironic that there were 12 members and there were 12 apostles that followed Christ, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think that is a parallel.
Yeah. Listen, we've got about a minute before I have to take my final break here, Ras Ben. What is the significance of Ben Franklin when he could have had any post he wanted, any secretary he wanted in the United States government? And he was Postmaster General.
Well, on a lot of levels, Ben Franklin was the hidden hand behind the more public figures that,
I see.
You see as president. And,
yeah.
Yeah,
one of the puppet masters.
I said, he was mirroring Francis Bacon's life, and Francis Bacon was the chancellor of the king, Yeah. So Franklin kind of played that part as far as, George Washington would be a parallel to England's Oliver Cromwell. Okay. Someone who is appointed leader but is not crowned king.
Well, Oliver Cromwell, I know him throughout history. He wasn't the president or the prime minister of Great Britain under the king.
Well, he committed monarchicide. He beheaded.
All right, listen, we've got to take our final break. I'm sorry I got so involved in this, so please stand by. Ras Ben is our guest. His website is rasben.com. We'll be back on the other side as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is our final segment with our very special guest this hour, Ras Ben. He is an innovative educator, counselor, wellness provider, peacekeeper, mediator, sacred timekeeper, and scribe. His website, www.rasben.com. First of all, Ras Ben, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show. And I must tell you, in my opinion, Benjamin Franklin is one of the unsung heroes of the Americas.
And okay, I mean, I can honor that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But from an indigenous perspective, some might be challenged with some of Franklin's legacy.
Such as?
Well, he is responsible for the diplomatic collapse of the Lenape as a people, you know, as a sovereign state that lived in this territory called Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the people of the Longhouse, or the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederation of Canada,
Mm-hmm.
because it was through the manipulation of a couple of treaties, the Treaty of Albany at the Albany Congress, where he asked the Iroquois not to align with the Lenape against the British, and pledged support against their efforts against the French, because the Iroquois were fighting the French up in Canada. The Lenape were fighting the British in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Franklin was an ambassador for both France and England and the colonies, and really, you know, he manipulated it such that at the end, both the Iroquois and the Lenape ended up without their land, because he betrayed that the Iroquois didn't align with the Lenape. The Lenape were defeated and dispelled at the conclusion of the 7-Year War, the French-Indian War.
Mm-hmm.
And the Treaty of Paris, which again was signed by Franklin, gave all Iroquois land to the British. So he betrayed the Iroquois after he convinced them not to align with the Lenape. So, you know, history has many sides, many facets, and give thanks we have a forum where we can, you know, see those different sides, you know?
But if we look throughout history, this is exactly what happens when one force conquers and another one loses. This is how history has been throughout, since the beginning of time. Like, we're not looking at anything unique here that Franklin did on the larger scale. There were other people in the United States as well as Canada who did the same thing to many of the indigenous people.
I agree. But you posed the question by saying you thought he was an unsung hero.
Well,
I honored that,
yeah.
But I also said that, there are other angles and perspectives on his life, and the impact that it's had,
But, doesn't the need of the many outweigh the need of the few?
Well, there were many Lenape and many Algonquin,
mm-hmm.
many Iroquois.
Yeah, we can say the same thing about the Chippewa. We can say the same thing,
exactly,
about the Ojibwe, the entire thing. I'm not saying that it was the way that it ended up as right. All I'm saying is that when you're trying to grow a nation, get an idea, a concept, a philosophy, and you see what needs to be done, it's a give and take. Like I wasn't there. I don't know the inners of the entire story, but it kind of echoes the War of 1812 as well. It was a very hard time in both the history of the United States and Canada. And if we look at other countries around the world where changes were done, there have always been those who have lost, those who have won. I'm not saying that all the time it works to everybody's advantage. It doesn't. But in the majority of cases, it does. Listen, I have to ask you at this point, tell me about your concept of the Mandela effect.
Well, I mean, I know many people are focused on that phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want to add to that discussion is that misnomers create confusion. And to name it the Mandela effect, that's a misnomer, because Nelson didn't do it. The manipulation of the space-time continuum that we see in the effects of the so-called Mandela effect. If you want to name it what it really is, it's the Philadelphia experiment effect. It is the effects of the manipulation of the space-time continuum.
By who?
By, on one level, naval research, initially, beginning with the experiment that was conducted with the USS Eldridge. But it is my understanding that that project was continued at Montauk Island, New York, primarily headed by a scientist named John von Neumann, who is one of the first users of ENIAC, and he was involved in the 1943 experiment with the USS Eldridge here in Philadelphia. But I also think that MIT has a piece of the research puzzle, and it is my understanding that John Trump, the biological uncle of Donald Trump, was involved with creating this technology as well.
So is it good? Is it bad? Or is it indifferent?
Well, it is, anything that is not aligned with the natural flow of space-time, I would say is, not good.
Well, if we look at that in a much simpler effect, if we're going to look at the time-space continuum, or the Great Universal Plan, as some people call it, if we get to a stop sign, and according to the Universal Plan, we're supposed to turn right, but because we have free will, we turn left. Does that upset the entire time-space continuum?
Well, if you honor the laws of space-time, I don't think it's a problem. I would say the use of this technology is a usurpation of the natural laws and the flow of space-time. And I think that it might cause problems. Yeah. It's not so much a relative question, is it good or bad, in terms of my opinion, as much as is rupturing the fabric of space-time healthy for the planet? How is that going to impact the collective mind of humanity? Is that doing something to, to us on a molecular level? There's a lot of questions that.
Well, we can say the same thing about Wi-Fi. We can say the same thing about microwaves. We can say the same thing about cell phones. So where do you stop?
I definitely say the same thing of those things, and that is a technology that we definitely should shield ourselves from as much as possible. Because they are unnatural radiations that jam up our natural frequencies. So I definitely, you're right.
Listen, Ras Ben, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a great pleasure. I wish you continued success, and I look forward to the next time you join us here in the X Zone. But once again, let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and where they can get your books.
RasBen.com, RasBen.com. I do have a YouTube channel, non-monetized, Ras Ben 188, where you can see, some of my presentations, and Great Mystery Philadelphia, as well as my first book, Rocks of Ages. They're both available at my website, RasBen.com.
Ras Ben, take care of yourself, good sir, and like I said, look forward to the next time you join us back here in the X Zone. All right, I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue talking about things within the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, and hopefully, we won't put a tear in the time-space continuum. Yeah, I'll be back on the other side of this break. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.